What everyday skill becomes suspicious if you're too good at it? Typing. I'm definitely going to say typing. I type at a little over 150 WPM. I've been repeatedly accused of faking it, which sounds funny until it's your coworkers and boss saying it, calling your work into question. Edit, holy crow. Thanks for my most upvoted comment. To answer a couple questions, I'm a writer. I use a QWERTY keyboard and I've been typing for a minimum of 3 hours a day for the past 16 or so years. My typing speeds have been measured in varying tests for work and school, the lowest coming in at 138 about 4 years ago and middling out about 6 months ago at 154. The highest I've scored on any reliable test was 157 last year. Typing speeds like mine aren't all that uncommon, certainly not as much as they used to be. Nothing special, I just type a lot. I find it much weirder that people find fast typing unlikely. I used to be a dispatcher for Home Hearing Fuel in Juneau, Alaska, and when I meet people I'd say, "Oh, you live such and such street." I'd get an uncomfortable silence from them and have to tell them we deliver your oil. I work. Former garbage man here. Yup. Strike up a conversation with someone at a bar once who I absolutely hated as a customer. These rotten pieces of wood throw food and refuse straight into a can that I couldn't put on a tipper, meaning I have to pick up and dump 200 lbs of 6 feet in the air and dump by hand. As soon as I heard his last name I repeated the first and his address. That knew. He knew. He had seen me throw that goddamned can into the middle of his yard on more than one occasion when I had rotten garbage juice running down the back of my neck because he was too lazy, stupid, or cheap to use a bag. I asked him politely to use a goddamn garbage bag or two and left it at that. And he did. Edit wanted to add I am a former garbage man. That job is hell. Remembering things about a person from a few months/years ago when the person herself can't remember about it. You just look like a stalker and it's frustrating. I totally understand. People always think I'm a creep because I remember almost everything about them after meeting. Even if we met years before. I was once hitting it off with a girl I knew from high school at a bar. She didn't remember me, and I just knew who she was. Like I was aware she existed, so I said, "Oh, I remember you from high school." And that was apparently the weirdest thing she'd ever heard, and it just killed the mood for her. Sorry, I remember that you existed. I'm such a creep. Edit. People are seriously grasping at straws to try to explain what happened to me. You weren't there, you don't know the context. We were talking about high school because it was already established that we went to the same high school. She was just weirded out that I remembered her and she didn't remember me. There is no deep explanation for it. Picking up on small details and remembering them for months. My friends are always like, "How did you possibly remember that?" I hate that. People ask me a question and I'm like, "You asked me the same thing last week on Monday and the week before on Wednesday. You wore a black shirt that day and we discussed politics over lunch, which was a steak." But it's quite selective. There's a lot I don't remember. This is near identical to me. Another thing is that my brother and I both mumble a lot, so sometimes it's almost easier for me to understand someone mumbling rather than when they enunciate. This leads to people just saying something to themselves and I'll catch it and respond and they're like, "How the hell did you hear that?" Not me, but someone I know once mentioned to me back in their high school days, they were suspected of being a snitch because they would always be inclined to leave right before the bust happened. It wasn't that the guy was a snitch. He'd say that sometimes he just got a feeling, or he knew when a party was just dead. Some sorta sixth sense for this. Every time he got around to leaving, his buddies would usually follow suit, since they were usually the ones dealing anyways. My grandfather was like that. He skipped so many Gestapo roundups. I asked him if he could pinpoint the thing that warned him, and he just say things looked different and I got an uneasy feeling. Once he did get caught by Gestapo, but he wouldn't elaborate much what happened after. You can imagine why. So by an incidental combination of being a gearhead and at one time a tow truck driver, I am a little more observant when it comes to cars than most. I also have a knack for numbers and memorize things unintentionally. I've stopped mentioning to people that I saw their car somewhere or other, the movies for example. It's awkward explaining that I know your plate and can spot your POS. Centre from across the parking lot. I thought that was just standard car enthusiast life. I don't know Dave, who's that? Oh, the guy that drives a white Prius, right? Who's Jeremy? Black Camaro, right? I know like hundreds of people based solely on the cars they drive. I have very fast reading comprehension. People never believe me when I say that I've already read it and get frustrated that I don't take longer. I can't do simple math, but I read like lightning. I'm also very good with card handling, so everyone suspects that I cheat at poker. I encourage that because it keeps their eyes on my hands and not on my face. My mom can speed read like that and it drives me nuts. One morning I gave her a book I had read because I found it interesting, The Wealthy Barber. While we're watching TV, I hardly noticed her glancing at the book and she proceeds to toss it on the coffee table. Oh, I finished reading it. Wholly 25 minutes at most. Given it's a fairly small book, 150 pages, it took me weeks to get around to finishing what she hardly flinched at. Crazy skill. I had teachers on school not believe that I read as fast as I did. I'd get accused of not actually reading what we were supposed to until they started asking questions about it and I could answer them all. Pretty much all I did as a kid was read, only child living in a place with no neighbors. My speed has gotten slightly slower now that I'm not reading for hours every day, but it's still fast. I remember reading an assigned book in one evening in middle school, and the next day when we had an assigned reading hour for it I told my teacher I'd read it. To test me, she opened the book up at a random page and asked me what sentence came next. Unfortunately I am not an autistic savant, so she accused me of lying. Sad face. I always have effectively anything I'll need in my handbag. Always. Need a fire? I have 3 different kinds of fire starter. Need a bandage? Do you want sterile or non-sterile? Because I have both. Need a sample of rock analyzed? I have a few little tricks and sufficient tools that I can tell you which region it most likely came from in my own, large, country, or alternatively I can tell you which country it most likely came from outside of mine, including the moon or Mars. Need to poison your nemesis in a sitcom-style murder attempt? Though it's not usually for murder, I do happen to carry a bunch of poisons with me. Need to perform surgery? I have all the sterile tools I'd need in a pinch and I'm a straight A medical student. Need to open up a car? I have multiple different screwdrivers of all sizes, pliers, a small saw, magnets, you name it I've probably got it. Need to rescue someone from a precipice? I have 550 pounds paracord in my bag. Sudden pains from the impromptu surgery? Don't worry, there are prescription strength painkillers in there too. I have a chronic illness so they're legally on a prescription. Need to give a maths lecture? I always have at least a scientific calculator, and often a graphing calculator, not always, it's too heavy. My handbag is really well stocked. It also has more normal things like aspirin and tampons and Lippy and too, but you'd be amazed how often I've needed to use the more extreme kinds of stuff in there too. People get creeped out a little when they jokingly ask, hey, does anyone have X? And I go, oh yeah, hand X over and gimme 2 minutes. Edit, actually I'd love to test this, please think of a weird scenario you'd like to have solved on the go and I'll see if I can make something to solve it with only things in my handbag. Doing math in your head. When I was in class and the teacher would pose a problem, I could do it in my head before the others could get out their calculators. Everyone would get annoyed and think I was cheating somehow. I feel you on this. I even got a test ripped up at one point because I did all the math that was on it and never took a calculator, even though it was made for using a calculator. It can also pose some problems for me when doing algebra, because I do it almost instantly in my head, and then I don't know how I'm supposed to do the equation, when you have a text question where it's required that you use an equation.